It's just a copy-paste to the final prosthesis, which is basically an absolute minimal invasive preparation.
Yeah, almost no preparation. You see just a little bit where the markings have been made, a little bit of flattening was performed.
Some composite was reduced.
Exactly, a little bit of smoothing. And then this situation can be, again, captured by an intraoral optical scan to then be finalized within the CAD/CAM workflow with the respective restorations by copy-pasting these files out of ceramic blocks. In this case, this was the plan. This was the final, I would say, outcome. It's the definite copy-paste situation of something that has been initially planned virtually, transferred to the clinics and validated via the mock-up, and then finally now inserted as a final restoration.
Exactly. And with this, we already come to an end, and we want to thank the team, clearly, because in the end, all of what we have been presenting to you and what we are going to present to you in the full extended version is only because we are really happy and grateful to work with such a bunch of young people. And yeah, we also want to thank everybody of you who's listening to work with us and to be with us for this evening and also for the next evenings to come. And we thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Irena. Thank you, Vincent. It was a very nice lecture. I'm pleased now to introduce Professor Petra Girtmühlen of Düsseldorf University in Germany, where she chairs the Department of Prosthodontics. She has done widely recognized research on zirconia and lithium disilicate materials during her time at New York University, and now dedicates much of her research and teaching to digital systems. Based on this, she will share latest insights today in her lecture entitled Digital Chairside, Myth and Reality. Petra, it's up to you now. We listen to you.
Dear Professor Attal, thank you so much for your kind introduction. I want to welcome you to my online webinar seminar on the topic Chairside Dentistry, Myth and Reality. We're actually facing turbulent times. We were all supposed to meet up in person in Paris, but now I have to take you to Düsseldorf. And I'm sending you the sunny greetings from Düsseldorf. And I want to present you the digital concept that we implement at the Heinrich Heine University in Düsseldorf. When we look at digital workflows, I could give you a very technical presentation on scanners and machines and mechanical properties of different materials. But at the end of the day, we're all dentists, we're treating patients, and we want to find feasible and digital solutions for their patient indications. So I brought you these 4 cases that I want to walk you through during my presentation. When we look at single tooth restoration, this is an easy treatment modality, and for that reason we decided to implement digital chairside dentistry also in our dental education program with our undergraduate students. And here you can see our brand new education center at the Heinrich Heine University. When we look at this case, it's an easy and straightforward case. We have 3 insufficient amalgam fillings that are replaced by CAD/CAM fabricated chairside all ceramic restorations fabricated from lithium disilicate ceramics. And when we look at the clinical long-term success of these restorations, we have high survival rates that are shown. When we look at anterior restorations, we have this young fellow, and he loves to wrestle, but unfortunately during this lesson he fractured his 2 central incisors. And when we look at this picture, we can even see that he required endodontical treatment because of these fractures, and he also wanted to have a fast and financially feasible restoration of this central incisor. Coming back to our topic, chairside dentistry, I could show you that reliability is the reality for CAD/CAM dentistry. But what are the myths in chairside dentistry? I'm a big fan of minimal invasive dentistry, and this has always been a big challenge to fabricate ultra-thin margins with chairside CAD/CAM dentistry. And if you look at this restoration, and this is a CAD/CAM fabricated veneer, you can see that there are some minor fractures at the margin, but these are not perfect margins for high quality dentistry, and this was always an issue. This issue even led to the development of new materials, CAD/CAM materials that are resin based, and some of the dental technicians created workarounds, and they are using CAD/CAM wax and use this CAD/CAM waxed restorations to press these final thin margined restorations to overcome it like that. As I said, I love ultra thin restorations, and now I would like to show you this young lady. And you can see already the problem that she is having. She also fractured her central and lateral incisor, and she fractured these incisors during her blood donation. She unfortunately fainted and suffered from a deep palatal fracture and also needed endodontical treatment. This picture shows you how deep the fracture was on the palatal aspect. And so we decided to use forced eruption to gain more retention of this tooth, of this lateral incisor. And this is now our new starting point for the final treatment. You can see this tooth, the lateral incisor, after this forced eruption. And now we also love to use a digital smile design tool. It's a very nice tool to visualize the treatment outcome for our patients and also to communicate the treatment outcome with our patients. So we implement this on a daily basis when we have aesthetic cases. And one other very critical step in this whole process is the shade selection. This can really be a pitfall in this entire workflow, as it needs a lot of experience and personal justification. This is the minimal invasive preparation design that we finished for these two central incisors. And then we start the digital design process. We start to put those teeth in the design software, and then based on the initial scan, we cut out the initial scan that we received from the first scan. And then we start the scanning procedure of the final preparation of those two anterior restorations. And here you can see the final digital capture of the preparation of those two central teeth. And here is the final digital design of those two restorations. And here are those restorations placed within the all-ceramic block. And then this file is sent to the milling device, and this shows the first and smallest 5-axis milling machine, and you can see nicely how thin the margins are and how precise the milling is performed by this machine. And when we took those blanks out, we were really fascinated of the precise ultra-thin margins. And this is the veneer restoration, this is the crown restoration. And so when we use a caliper to find out the thin parts, so it's down to 0.3, and you can see no brittle fracture. Here is a close-up of those restorations after the CAD/CAM milling. You see these are flawless margins without any fractures in the marginal areas, so highly precise, ultra-thin margins. In this case, we also used a printed model. This is not used for a fit evaluation. This is more or less only used to hold the restorations for the further characterization. Here you can see how we characterize those restorations, and this is still in the blue stage, those restorations on this printed model. Then we start the try-in of the blue stage restorations to just control the fit and the shape, and if necessary, perform some adjustments. And after that, we further characterize the restorations, but not inform only with surface staining. And here you can see the final outcome of these restorations, think it's really a beautiful outcome that we could obtain with this monolithic, only surface stained restorations and those beautiful, highly ultra thin, well-fitting margins. So this is no longer a myth, it's a reality. And if you want to see more, meet me again. I'm happy to show you our concept on resin bonded fixed dental prosthesis, on fixed dental prosthesis 3 unit and 4 unit, also out of different materials like zirconia. I would like to show you implant restorations that we implement with a digital workflow, but also full arch restorations. And in this presentation, I will also highlight step-by-step procedures, as well as the scientific background on material selection and evidence-based, as well as clinical long-term results of this treatment concept. With that, I would also want to address that digital workflow always needs a reliable team. This is my team at the University of Düsseldorf. And with that, I want to thank you for your kind attention. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me at this email address. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would like to thank you, Irena, thank you, Vincent, thank you, Petra, for these two very nice short presentations. So now we have some time for what we call the panel discussion. So I'll begin with some questions. First for Irena and Vincent. So Irena, what is your preference for the choice of the bonding system to bond the crown on the T-base? First for Irena and Vincent. And you told us, Irena, that there was possible biological complications for the induced by the bonding system so close to bond the crown on the T-base. Can you tell us more about this? You told us, Irena, that there was possible biological complications for the induced by the bonding system so close to the crown on the T-base. Can you tell us more about this? You told us, Irena, there was possible biological complications
that we would use would really depend on the material that the restoration would be made out of. There is more translucent materials like lithium disilicates, for example, where we see that we need a special type of really opaque cement to cover the gray color of the titanium base. But we also need a certain chemistry where we have a good connection to titanium and also a good connection to the lithium disilicate. And we have published a study, and it will appear in a very recent issue of the International Journal of Prosthodontics, specifically on the aesthetic, but also on the cementation outcomes of lithium disilicate crowns to tie base. And we found that a bis-GMA resin with an opaque color, like a Multilink or a Panavia cement with an opaque color, will really deliver the best outcomes. It would be very easy and very nice if we could just select one specific cement, and it would really work with all the restorative materials that we have. But unfortunately, this is not the case. So we had a series of studies where we looked into bonding of monolithic crowns to titanium bases, and we really found out that for zirconia, we need a different cement than for lithium disilicate. And again, we need a different cement for the hybrid ceramics than for the other two materials. So really should look into the manufacturer recommendations in the best case, and select zirconia cements that have a phosphate monomer molecule that bonds adhesively, really chemically to the material. And in which case ever, we should always select the most opaque version of the cement.
For the biologic complications?
Yeah, when it comes to the biologic complications, it's a little bit more, I would say, complex, because we have a lot of literature showing that excess cements, specifically resin cements, they can cause biologic problems around the implants and implant restorations. This new type of restoration, the monolithic abutment crown cemented to titanium base, is not evaluated yet, so we don't know if this specific resin cement close to the bone level will have problems over time or not.
On the other hand, as you saw in this clinical picture of this 1 molar that we presented, you see this high precision of these two components once being glued together. So in the end, I mean, this is not really a cement gap any longer. You see here a very, very minor cement gap. So yeah, for sure it will have a different impact than any of a conventional cementation.
Thank you very much. Maybe one question to Petra. Petra, there are many questions on your very nice case, your restorations of the 2 central incisors. They are really great. But first question I have, it is not so easy for a dentist. How do you set the indications for chairside and lab side digital workflows? What is your concept?
So thank you very much for your question. Thank you also for the compliment. I mean, restoring central incisors, this is our passion, and we really like to put a lot of effort in characterizing those incisors together with our, sometimes chairside ourselves, and sometimes also together with our ceramist. When we look at the concept, so we have a pretty clear concept in Düsseldorf for single tooth restoration. When we look at inlays, onlays, partial crowns, and also single crowns in the posterior region, we are trying to use the chairside system as much as possible. When we look at the anterior, we also try to use chairside dentistry, but if we have tough cases with a high level of complexity, we use also the collaboration with our dental technicians, because sometimes if we have a complex shading, we need the finish of a dental master. When we look at multiple teeth or more complex restorations, such as full arch restorations, then we always need to have the collaboration with a dental technician. Those cases, in my eyes, are not possible to be finished up in a chairside setup. So still the collaboration with our dental labs is very important. When we look at implant dentistry for single tooth implants, we use the chairside workflow, as Irina and Vincent showed nicely as well, since quite some time, and we're very successful and we love this treatment workflow. But when we have complex implants situation, then we also in the lab workflow.
And with this case, can we tell us which ceramic materials did you use for these two central incisors?
For these two central incisors, we used the Emax, but we also used a little bit of surface characterization for this case. But Emax and surface characterization.
And are you afraid of the evolution of the shading, of the staining?
Pardon?
Doesn't staining, how do you think the evolution of the staining with time?
Over time, we don't have problems with that. We're using this staining technique. Also, we had a study many years ago on partial crowns in the posterior, where we have even strong loads on the occlusal aspects where we use staining, and we don't only probably in the contact points, but on central incisors on the buccal aspect, I don't see any problems with the staining over time. No, I don't have any issues with that. No, it will be stable over time.
Jean-Pierre, would you allow me to ask a question to Petra as well?
Yes, of course.
You see, with all these great materials today and the great cases that you're showing, do you see any indication still for these handmade, feldspathic, layered veneers, you know, manually made by the technician, just the perfect outcomes? Do we need this?
I think I have one dental technician who loves to do them, and if we would have a case for additional veneers, I think this is the only way to really add those tiny little parts. Then you really need the classical feldspathic porcelain to come up with a solution for these kind of cases. But on a daily routine, and there was also this nice review that pointed out that the strength and also the long-term survival of these pressable ceramic is just so much higher than for the feldspathic ceramics. I personally think that you might get like 20% higher aesthetics, but the question is, do you really want to sacrifice long-term survival for those 20%? So I personally think there is a small indication range today for classical feldspathic veneers. On a daily routine, we use press, or now with the new milling devices, the CAD version.
Thank you.
And a last question for this case. And for this veneer case, can we also do direct composite?
Of course. A composite works always, to be honest with you. I'm a big fan of ceramics. I love ceramics. I think there are some composite superstars like Dieci, Vanini, and they really get composite veneers to the highest level. And those restorations, they are beautiful, and I think they're also very long-lasting. And I've seen so many presentations and really impressed by their work. But if we look at the daily life and what we see in our dental offices, I think this is not really, unfortunately, it's not the reality. So the classical composite veneer, unfortunately, looks different, and also the aging of the composite is different. And just recently, there has been a beautiful study from the group of Groningen, and they clearly showed that the survival rate at 10 years is at 100% for all ceramic veneers, but only 75% survival rate for composite veneers. So I think this is strong data, and that we all should also use in our practice to guide us in our ways that we are selecting our materials. And I think when we're looking at this data, I think the question is clear. I mean, from a financial standpoint, of course, it might be more attractive to use composites, but you will have to redo them probably more often. So I think if you look at veneers, ceramic is the best choice. But as I mentioned before, I love ceramics.
And a very last question for this case: which bonding system did you use to bond the veneers? And is it possible to lute rather than bonding?
So since a long time, we're using the VarioLink system, and so we have excellent data, long-term data when we were using the VarioLink 2, and also now with the VarioLink aesthetic, and so we have long-term success with that, and so we never changed it.
Thank you. I have now many questions for Irena and Vincent about the virtual mock-up. So first question is the following. Who does the virtual mock-up, the dentist or the technician?
I would say maybe I can answer the dentist part. Sure. If it's the virtual mock-up, which is really like the final design for the final restoration, it's clearly enough, it's the technician. If it's just a, I would say, try-in version coming out of the tooth library, then it's also can be done by the dentist. So it really depends. If it's really a mock-up that should be transferred into the final restoration, it needs to have the skills of a dental technician elaborating this within the design software.
But if you just address the point that we presented in this clinical case, you see that, you know, that the first interaction of the patient, you know, coming into a dental office, for sure, usually there is no dental technician around. So, I mean, these tools, they enable the dentist to have a communication platform to visualize, you know, a potential goal somewhere down the road in a future treatment. So for me, this initial communication tool is really strong, and clearly it's in the hands of the dentist. And then, you know, you can move further and you can send also the patient towards your laboratory technician, and then they can use the same applications and once again redefine certain parameters. But in an initial appointment, clearly it's, I think, in my perspective, the dentist yes. to have this communication tool.
So, and can we have any information about the bite? And can we see the occlusal view with Ivosmile? And Ivosmile, can this technology estimate how much video is required for the treatment?
Well, not within the app as it is available today, because it's really just a communication, I would say, aid or a communication tool where one can select out of a prefabricated tooth library variation, different shapes and sizes of teeth, just to see what type of tooth would match best for the aesthetics that the patient wants. But it's not more than that, and it needs the file that is selected needs to be exported out of the app into a real true design software where you can definitely also augment the vertical dimension of occlusion. You can analyze how much would be necessary. The same for the preparation amount. You can really analyze much more, but not within the app. The app is until now a pure communication tool.
Exactly, but still, as you could also see, the cut link allows you, you know, to translate the initial display of the, let's say, the anterior tooth position. And that actually guides the technician a lot, then reassembling, you know, the needed vertical dimension and, let's say, the assumed vertical dimension for the further treatment process. So it is a guide, let's put it like this, but it really doesn't tell you, okay, we need to have additional 4 or 5 millimeters in vertical dimension.
Okay, thank you. And is it possible then to skip the actual mock-up try-in, as we already have such a detailed visualization by the Ivosmile application?
I mean, to our understanding, absolutely no. So let's say you have a very, very over-contoured old bridge restoration, then you might be able to really skip this kind of direct mock-up or indirect mock-up physical in the patient's mouth. But for us, it's a first communication tool to narrow down on the desired shape, the position of the central incisors, you know, the smile appearance and the smile line. But then we really see, and we see an absolute need for a real physical mock-up, not only, you know, to give the patient and allow the patient to really function with it, but also, you know, to verify the phonetics, and to verify, you know, the feeling of this new kind of outline in his mouth. Get used to it. For some of our cases, even for several days. We will not take out the mock-ups immediately then.
Test the speech with it, test everything, you know, the reaction of the surrounding, I would say the feeling of what is going to be the final.
For us, the critical part or the critical advantage is that once the patient comes into your office, without, you know, any kind of, let's say, harmful treatment, even if you consider an optical impression is really the opposite of harmful, but still the patient needs to lay down and, you know, he has to expose him or herself. applying such an application allows you to have a communication platform. And then you take it from there and you narrow it down. Does the patient want a diastema, yes or no? Does she or he want to have round or square teeth? This is a lot of really crucial information that helps then the technician in the next step to really come up with a very detailed first approach that most likely is going to be the start of then the treatment sequence.
Okay, thank you. And is EvoSmile application already available? Can we buy it, for example?
For sure. You can even download it for free if you work with it on the, let's say, reduced version just on an iPhone. If you want to have the full version, unfortunately, I think today only it works in the Apple world. You can download it from the App Store. And it depends a little bit on the country you're watching and you're tuned in. I think there's different countries with different regulations and so on. So you will see. Just check it out on the App Store.
Thank you. Many questions for Petra now because of the ultra thin lithium disilicate veneers. First question: do you think that in this case you can use composite veneers because it's not so easy to mill ceramics?
I think the part with the composite veneers, I've discussed this before, but when we look at milling, this was always the biggest challenge when we look at all ceramic restorations and chairside milling. So in the past, this was always a big problem. We had fractures at the thin margins. But now, since we are having the new 5-axis milling machine, the PM1, I was really impressed when I saw those first milling results, as we're now really able to mill those thin margins. And I think it's pretty clear that this machine was designed for glass ceramic milling, and so the outcome is really beautiful. And I'm happy to now add this workflow for minimal invasive dentistry.
And what about Emax Press and not Emax CAD for this kind of indication?
Emax Press, I think, always works. So in the past, we were using, when we had those thin margins, and we sometimes had to change for press if it was a conventional case. But when we were looking at digital cases, we always try to use sometimes the milling of wax patterns that were then invested and then pressed afterwards, as we were not able to mill those thin margins in the Emax CAD. So we were using wax milling and then use the press to press those those thin margins. So I think this is really what I was always wishing to have, a machine that is able to mill those thin margins. So I think this is really a nice addition in the digital world.
And do you have long-term outcomes about these ultra-thin restorations?
With ultra-thin restorations, yes. We were looking at those restorations since quite some years when we look at extensive cases. And you can also see this in my 60-minute presentation. I'm sharing a case with you that is now 5 years. But we also did cases before with the press and with the ultra-thin margins and also ultra-thin occlusal thicknesses. We also did a lot of in vitro research on that. But to be honest, we did the in vitro research as we were knowing that it works so nicely clinically. We just did the in vitro research to get out the scientific evidence for that. And we know that this is working very well in vitro and also clinically.
And are they indicated for patients with pathological disorders such as bruxism?
There are always some limitations. So I think the bruxers still, there are the high-risk patients in our dental offices. And for them, when we restore them, we really have to watch out their occlusion. We also have to watch out if we might if you're able to really stop those patterns and first use provisionals. Sometimes we're using long-term provisionals when we increase the VDO, sometimes we can obtain stable results with their parafunctions also from that standpoint. But I would be really careful with those thin restorations when we have patients with parafunctions. But if we're able to kind of break through this cycle, then it's a new approach. But with those ultra thin restorations, I would be careful with patients that are heavy bruxers.
Thank you.
Or you might do zirconia restorations. That's another option.
A question for Vincent, maybe. Is it possible to make ceramic chips using CAD/CAM technology?
It's always a limitation, as Petra nicely mentioned, and you see the limitation of these very, very small things that you have to mill, or you will be able to mill. The biggest problem here is a little bit the minimum parameters that you have to, take into consideration. So if you actually take into account that you have to do a certain amount of post-processing manually, I think you can say yes. If you imagine that these chips, they fall out of the machine and they will be perfect, I think no. I hope this was let's say, at least a decent reply to this question. There is all the ingots that you need. There's like very high translucent opalescence ingots. So these chips, they're actually feasible, but I think they need a little bit of post-processing manually in order to really come up with a perfect fit, especially in the border area or in the margin areas.
Thank you. Another question for the implant zirconia restoration. Do you ever leave the sublingual part of this restoration unglassed?
Yes, this is always our aim. It's not clearly visible, where is the line, but we try to have, especially on bone level type of implants, what we have just shown you was a tissue level type of implant. We try to have at least 1.5 millimeter of, in this case, as we have shown, pure zirconia, just polished, as it will have the best effect on the surrounding tissues.
Thank you. Maybe a question for Irena. With the advent of digital dentistry, how do you equate a large initial cost and the earnings? How do you
That's a very difficult question. I wish I was a banker and I could do a real true business plan, but I think this is really something that future offices will need to consider more and more. To have a financial expert included in the planning of an office, because all of these different devices and the technology are fairly expensive still today. And it's a large investment that has to be amortized. So it really depends on what type of patients will be treated in this office and what type of regular daily work will the dentist do, which will sort of define which type of digital investment is really worthwhile. Some will do really large implant cases, so they really need another type of equipment than dentists that do regular, I would say, chair-side restorations of small pieces up to single unit crowns, which they produce themselves without a technician. So there's really different opportunities today, and you cannot really say just, generally what makes sense and what doesn't. It's very individual.
Thank you. A question for Petra. How do you manage forced eruption of the lateral incisor without orthodontic treatment?
So this is a treatment protocol which we use just to get more retention. First, we try to cut the periodontal ligament to get, because in this case we didn't want to get the gingiva down, we only wanted to rub the tooth. This is also, depends on the case, what you want. And then we use the special device to get the extrusion going. And then depends on what you want to obtain, how much millimeters. And after the extrusion, it's also very important to have a retention phase. And once you're done with all that, then you can start restoring. But I think in this case, it was really the most elegant way to keep this tooth, because it was really a deep fracture on the palatal part. And so we figured that this would be the most elegant way for this young lady to maintain this lateral incisor.
Thank you. And Irena, you show a case with orthodontic pre-treatment before prosthodontics. Do you often use and work with orthodontics before prosthodontics?
I have to say more and more, first of all, because it allows us frequently to stay much less invasive with the restorations afterwards. If we have a collaboration in an interdisciplinary way with an orthodontist who prepares, I would say, the ground for the restorations in the end. So the spaces are well distributed, and the length of the teeth, and also the gingival and the dental aesthetics has been already, I would say, prepared by an orthodontic pre-treatment. And then secondly, also because there is a lot of opportunities that are available today through digital technology. So you can really plan the case virtually. You can visualize what the patient wanted, then plan it in an orthodontic software, and then also deliver the, I would say, CAD/CAM made stents in order to have alignment of the teeth, moving of the teeth in the right direction, and then finalize the treatment with the restorations made CAD/CAM, which in the end are copy-paste of the beginning, so of the plan in the beginning. And this is, I would say, a workflow which is getting more and more established in order also to allow for less invasive treatments. Yes.
A question for Petra and for Vincent. How can we achieve shade with minimal invasive preparation with thin veneers?
Ladies first.
Vincent, maybe, or Petra?
Vincent, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, because Petra delegates to Vincent.
Okay.
So.
I try to get along with ladies first, but it's not so easy today. I think there is a clear limitation. To a small extent, you can cover something with, let's say, a minimal thickness of 0.5. You can maybe transform a shade from A3 to A2, but you cannot achieve miracles. You can even maybe come up with some little opaque areas by, putting some ceramic opaque to the integral part of the restoration. There are some small tricks that you can apply, but in the end, it will always have an effect on the final aesthetic appearance. So if we have this worst case scenario, you have one discolored abutment tooth that you need to incorporate into, let's say, 6 veneers. In the end, you have to gain a little more space. One way is to just augment more towards the buccal and more volume. This is something that the patient has to allow you to do. Another option is to be slightly more subtractive and reduce then most likely this, usually it's not a vital tooth then that we face here. So I think I don't feel too stressed about asking slightly more reduction in volume. And then the third option, as we just talked about orthodontics, is, gaining space in that sense. But we cannot achieve any miracles here.
Thank you. I don't see Petra anymore. I don't understand why, but I can ask a question for Irena. Irena, at the end of the academic training, are your students in Geneva autonomous with CAD/CAM chairside technology?
Yes, I would say yes, because they're really heavily trained in the 3 years of their dental school, where they're exposed, first of all, to phantom patients in the beginning, and then also to a large number of real patients, where they do a lot of chairside restorations, starting from small inlays to overlays to single unit crowns, even bridges in some specific cases, where they learn how to color a zirconia and sinter it and then finalize it. So we're very much specialized on digital technologies in Geneva, and we're very well equipped, I would say. I think we're really able to work with all the most important systems today, and the students can benefit from it, yes.
Maybe let me add here some point. If you talked and you asked before about the financial impact of having all this expensive equipment in a dental office. Clearly, there is numbers that have to add up. does it make sense to buy this or that equipment? But if you have, you know, a successful office today, and first of all, you have the perception of your patients, but also you want to, you know, continue to be successful, you know, to hand the office over to, I don't know, a younger dentist. I think it's very important that you also see the dental technology or the field of our profession through the eyes of these young clinicians. And for them, digital technologies, this is their everyday base. So that is nothing special.
Thank you very much. Petra is here now. Maybe you can add something for the question of the shade of the ultra thin veneers.
Yes, so unfortunately our connection broke, but I'm back. So those, if we have discolored teeth, I think it's really tough to mask it with veneers. When we try bleaching, I think it's not even better because we know over time that the color is coming back. So I think it's really a tough choice, but sometimes we really have to consider probably different treatment modalities. And as Vincent said, we're sometimes also using those colors that we try to put to mask some discolorations. But if we have a generally discolored tooth, it's just probably rather a contraindication for this ultra-thin restorations. Unfortunately, I didn't get the answer that Vincent was giving, so I hope that there was not too much overlap.
But maybe, Petra, you can make the conclusion. What are for you the major advantages of digital dentistry?
I think this one, I can keep it very short and simple. In my eyes, it's predictability and reliability. I think these are the major achievements of digital dentistry. Irina was pointing that out also nicely. We can envision the outcome at a very early state of the treatment, and then the patient just has the prototype, and once they like it, we just move on and we're done. And so all the stress of those big cases are gone when you perform those cases with the digital workflow. So for me, it's really a very nice treatment workflow for large cases, and also what we mentioned before, cost and time efficient for small cases in the chairside workflow.
Thank you very much, Petra. Thank you very much, Irena. It's time to finish our panel discussion. Thank you, Vincent. It is the end of the first session of the International Expert Symposium. I remind you that you can have access to on-demand webinar for the long version of these two presentations just after now. And otherwise, we will meet again tomorrow for once more great presentations. Be ready. The same time. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Jean-Pierre.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good evening.